Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will get started shortly.
I would want to say.
I'm doing a webinar.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will get started shortly. We've got a few more folks logging in. In the meantime, if you could please mute your microphones, that would be great.
Wow, good for you. I was really up in the
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Angie Whitcomb. I am the Executive Vice President here at the Minneapolis Chamber, and I am pinch hitting today for my colleague Christine Lindmans, who has unexpectedly come down with that crud that is going around. So this should be a good program. We are glad you are here. And in getting us started, I would ask Amy to move us to the next slide. I want to tell you a little bit about the MSP Wellness Partnership. MSP Wellness is a program that equips employers in Minneapolis and Hennepin County with the tools to help their employees live well and to cultivate a culture of health within their workplaces. This program is supported by the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, the Minneapolis Health Department, Hennepin County Health Department, and our friends at Health Partners. This morning, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to our friend and colleague Joel Spoonheim, who is Health Partners Senior Director of Worksite, Health and Population and Wellbeing. Joel, thanks so much for being here today. I'm going to let you take it from here.
All right, good morning and happy, let's see, today is Tuesday and happy Valentine's Day to all of you. This is going to be fun, at least I hope it's going to be fun today. We're going to talk a lot about some principles of design and then like what do you do with it. And so just I'm going to start out with, if we go to the next slide, start with the end in mind. What are the takeaways? And the takeaways are a little bit like the picture. Before you read the words, look at this picture. It's a picture that speaks well to what we're trying to accomplish when we think about improving the health and well-being of people that we serve, which is life has its storms. But if we build that lighthouse of wellness, we can weather anything. And I thought this was a pretty poignant photo, though I couldn't find the one I was looking for from the North Shore. So grab this one. So what we're going to do is I'm going to spend a couple minutes going through what are best practice design principles. I want to be really upfront. I am going to go in depth only on 2 of 9 because you all can read at your own leisure after the details that will help you absorb this. But I will provide a framework going deep into 2 and then skimming the rest. Because what I really want to do is get to answering the questions that come in the 3rd bullet, which is, so how do you use them? Like, what is the actual application that can allow you to use them to have a positive impact? And so to that 2nd bullet, the question is often, well, it's nice to have best practices, but do they work? And the answer is yes. And I'm going to show you a couple of ways to help them work. So if we go to the next slide, I want to acknowledge my good friend and colleague, Dr. Nico Pronk, who back in 2014 led the effort to identify these best practices. These best practices come from a lot of different studies. These are not just Health Partners work. And this study, when it was published, became kind of the gold standard and benchmark for a lot of wellness programs. And the questions were like, okay, so you've done this work and it is a great compilation and synthesizing of these best practices, but now what? And I'm happy to share that in our next slide, we at Health Partners wanted to continue, and we have done a number of analyses on how do these work. In this most recent study in 2021, we leveraged our ability at Health Partners as both a health insurance company and a care system and a wellness provider and a research institute to take a look at what the data tell us. We identified 16 employers that used Health Partners insurance. So that was the one common element they had to have, is they all used our insurance for at least 4 years so that we would have cohort data over this time. But then we were able to say which of them have good wellness programs or well-being programs, and we identified a subset. And from there,
I'm on mute. This is a webinar.
This is, yeah, someone's not on mute there.
We just went through the social.
Hello, thank you. So we took that list and then we narrowed it down some more and said who has robust wellness programs. And from there, took some that used our wellness programs and some that used our competitors, because there are a lot of great wellness providers in our region. We're really fortunate that way. We also, though, had the ability to benchmark everybody's programs to these standards based on their robustness. And so we took a measure of the robustness of the program based on these best practices to their claims trends and other measures. And we're able to quantify and demonstrate that the more robust, the better an organization applies best practices, the better their health plan trends are going to be, their claims trends are going to be. And so that's this chart is basically the sum up that, the better you do, the more robust you are, that's the bottom right measure, the better your health trend will be, meaning lower costs. So that was 2021. So then we continued our work. If you, next slide, we wanted to say, well, what are ways that we can help people apply these best practices? And one of the things that we've done, both with the 9 best practices as a tool, but also with the CDC scorecard. And I just want to acknowledge there are multiple assessments one can use in this way. But we wanted to look at, can you use measurement as an intervention? Not only using measurement of best practices as a way to evaluate your program, but also as the intervention. And one of the things that we found, and I will walk you through how we did this, is that across the board, when we used the best practices as a participatory measurement process in 2016 and again in 2019, we saw across the board improvement in all measures. And we believe that's because when well-designed assessment work is done, it integrates the right people at the right levels of the organization and breadth of the organizations to have a conversation that helps people understand what the best practices are and helps provide that clarity of where they should be headed over the coming years. And this will be a big chunk of what we're going to talk about today. So now I want to switch over to the next slide. And I'm going to dive deep, as I said, into 2 of the 9 best practices. And the first one is leadership. If we go to the next slide. So a lot of words on this page and a lot less than the study, but I'm going to cover it. So leadership. A best practice of having good leadership is that you will have leaders. You'll be able to see that you have leaders who are setting up program vision, setting policy to support health and well-being, making sure that there are resources available as appropriate at the individual and organizational level, that they will support rigorous implementation, and of course, connecting the wellness and well-being and health to business goals. I think we saw very clearly over the last few years how important health is to business performance, but most employers don't actually clearly call out how that affects them, and that's an important step. The last piece in that overview is that leadership needs to be involved and engaged at multiple levels of the organization. So you can have a great top leader who's talking the talk, but if no one else is walking the walk, you're not going to get there. So within this 9 best practices, there are actually a series of other design principles that you can look for. And with leadership, there are 7 that the research identified. One is that you can assess the organizational commitment to a healthy culture. You can look to see if those programs are connected to company mission, vision, and objectives.
No, bye-bye.
Ensure that there's adequate resourcing and
Please,
strategic
Joel,
plan.
can I jump in for a minute? If we could
Yep.
please make sure your systems are muted, that would be great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your participation in that.
So also on leadership, that there's a strategic plan, and this is a strategic plan for your wellness or well-being programs that also those should connect to organizational strategic goals. I already mentioned multi-level leadership. You got to have people at all levels, and you need to see if they're engaged. And there's different ways to assess that, but part of that is sharing their own stories and talking about what their wellness journey is and how it connects to their work. And of course, that there's got to be somebody who's accountable, because if no one's owning it, it's not going to happen. So that's leadership overall and 7 kind of sub elements. If we go to the next slide, it's about partnership. And we want to recognize that no employer can do this on its own. And so if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about the elements of partnership that are about integrating the program with people and entities, both internal to the organization and potentially in the community. And so here you'll see that we're looking at how do the employees, the unions, external vendors, et cetera, all come together around doing this work in an alignment. So part of that includes participatory process. That means listening to the various stakeholders and helping them connect this work together. 2, there's got to be worker involvement. and representation and decision making. And we're going to give you an example of how we did that through our assessment as intervention approach. Connecting it to the community. This, if you think back to 2014, we were not talking about social determinants of health at all, except for a few very forward-thinking studies. And that field was very much in its nascent stage of awareness building. Today, we all know and understand where people live impacts their health. Their zip code impacts their health. So thinking about how employers can understand that and connect to those community resources that may be there, or be supportive of the creation of those resources that are needed for their employees. And then of course there needs to be an internal and external partnership and team orientation. This means you can't have people who think they can solve all the world's problems on their own, but really bring that collaborative partnership mindset. All right, so that's going deep into two of the principles. I'm now going to fly through very quickly the rest. So next slide is a nice picture. I just like this one, comprehensiveness. Let's go to the next slide. Here, we're just going to talk about the whole breadth of well-being. And so this is making sure you're addressing physical, social, psychosocial, etc. So all the dimensions of well-being, but also comprehensive at looking at organizational as well as communication, as well as individual level programming. So let's go to the next slide. Implementation. Next slide. Yeah, we got to just make sure that things are well planned and well executed. Too often, I observe a lot of wellness programs are out there and they have very good vision and mission, but they don't actually apply the same rigor to implementation, because it's a committee of people who come in from all over the organization and nobody really often owns it. And so for things to be successful, you've got to have that rigor in implementation. One great thing if you're a larger employer is you got to have dedicated on-site staff. And if you're not a larger employer, you got to at least have a designated person who has it as part of their duties and is recognized for that part of their role. Next slide. Engagement. So with engagement, we want to really make sure of two things I'm going to call out here. One is that there's meaningful and relevant participation rewards or incentives. Like, people want to be part of something. And the thing about well-being is we don't want it to just be about one element of well-being. So you want to have a variety of choices that are relevant, and then bring people together. One of the ways to do that is to have a really diverse group of well-being champions. Again, multiple locations, multiple skill sets as is appropriate for your work site. Next slide. Communications. Communications are critical to supporting, obviously, the engagement. But here are a couple specific things that were interesting. We have seen far too many employers focus only on their incentive period and as the focus of their communications. And it really needs to be year-round as part of the culture of health. Also needs to be a brand, something that, when people see it, they're like, oh yeah, that's my reminder of my company encouraging my health. So like, having some of those tips that are brought in, and of course a robust communications plan. All right, next we're going to touch on data-driven, and here, data matter because we're all being pushed to talk about the ROI, the return on investment. Why, we need to prove the worth, and so measurement matters. And we realize that smaller employers can't always do the same level of analysis because of privacy issues in our healthcare world, which is okay. There is still other data that one can identify and correlate to best practice. So like just collecting the data that you can as appropriate to your organization, and doing that with complete data integrity and security. And if we want to talk about that later, we sure can. All right, compliance, the last of the 9. I always joke with my team, let's just make sure no one's going to jail. But it's serious. Data confidentiality is just absolutely important, because without it, you lose trust. And without trust, you don't have participation and engagement. So we really want to make sure that as employers are implementing wellness programs, they have someone they can lean on to ensure that they are following regulations and ethical guidelines, because health is private. It is one's own personal information, And so we have to balance that fine line of deciding how do we encourage people to share, but not do it in a way that is punitive or in any way jeopardizes their community at work. So compliance. So now to jump ahead. That was the quick, super fast. And I'm going to jump into how do you actually then use this. And this is the fun part. So this is about using measurement as an intervention. And our approach, and again, we've done this with both the 9 best practices and with the CDC scorecard, is that you get an employer to set up a multi-level, multidiscipline team from across the organization. Let me get very concrete. If you're an employer of 30 people, well, you should have somebody who's in executive leadership, somebody who's frontline, and some people in the middle. And they should not all be from HR. You need people who come from different perspectives in the organization. I can't tell you how many stories we've collected where people from the same organization with different viewpoints, as we go into this, can score the same measure, a 0 or a 1 or a 9 and a 10. And so you need people at all levels, because it's that conversation that gives you your most accurate assessment of how we're doing. Then it's typically a 2.5-hour commitment of people being all together in the room, because that's what it takes to have a meaningful conversation that provides the insights. And then our approach is to very quickly, a little about the same pace you saw me going at those first 2 slides, but like a presenter says, here is what we're measuring in a quick overview of 2 minutes. Then you have everybody put down their individual perspective. This is the quiet individual work time. They have 2 to 3 minutes, and I'll show you the scorecard that we've used. But then you have everyone come together, and the first thing we have people do is at the same time, everyone, because all the scoring is on a 1 to 10, holds up, like, on this measure, what did you score? You know, it might be a 2, it might be a 7. But everyone holds it, and then you look around, and then it's the conversation that happens. Okay, so why do you think we're a 2? Why do you think we're a 10? And people have that conversation, and as a group, you come together with a shared number, which is what you then use for your benchmarking. Now, that's swell, and it creates a lot of great conversation, but that's not enough. So if we go to the next slide, part of what I want to do is just show you in depth one scoring sheet that we've used. And we're going to actually give you a chance right in just a moment to do this, because I thought, why just talk at you, but we'll give you an experience. So you're going to have 2 questions in a moment where we're going to ask you to rate your organization or an organization that you're thinking about. And the premise here of what we've done is we said, and a few moments ago, I walked you through all those 7 high-level parts of the leadership design principle. And then we tailored this to ourselves and said, here are examples that might be relevant across the organization. And what we want people to do is measure how well implemented, so is this actually happening? But then there's actually the quality of what's being implemented, because you can implement a communications program that goes out every week, but it's just boring. And so then you want to ask, is it effective? And so how effective is that communications plan, or how effective is the time that's being allocated for well-being? If you look at number 3, adequate resources, which is, how effective is that time? Well, yeah, we may say that there's time every day, but if the time is before the shift and nobody wants to come in early, it's not effective. So that's why you measure both. Is it happening, and how well is it happening? If we go to the next slide, you'll see one way that we just, people could take their own notes, and then they would score their individual response. And then after the conversation, they would score their group response. So at this point, we've got 2 polls for you to try to get a quick opportunity to present, and also to give me a chance to drink some tea. But we're going to pull up the polls. I want to thank Amy, who's going to work the magic here. All right. So to what degree is leadership being implemented in your operations? And so you can see there should be a poll popping up. Trusting by the silence that everyone's getting to see the poll. I can't see faces, so I'm just trusting.
The submit button isn't working.
Ah,
Amy, any thoughts on that? I'm seeing responses show up on my end as a co-host.
There's 2 questions to answer. Did you answer both of them?
you might need to scroll down to finish the second one. All right, so Amy, as soon as we go to the next poll, or we want to show the answers that we've got.
All right, hold on just a moment. Let me pull
Yeah.
these polls up. Can you see this
All right.
screen?
We can only right now see the slides, not the poll.
I think we need to end at the first poll, Amy, and then launch
Okay.
the second one.
Oh, I can share my results. Here we go.
Oh, look at that. All right, so how well is it implemented? Somebody's definitely not seeing it. There's actually, across our population here today, there are a number of people who are just not feeling the love on Valentine's Day for wellness from their leadership. Okay, totally not unexpected. So let's scroll down and let's see. The poll, I'm seeing the data on my personal screen and I'm able to move it, so you'll need to scroll down. But what's interesting is as you go to how effective is what you're seeing, here the scores are a bit better, definitely higher. So when people are seeing it, it's pretty effective. Now, what would be fun if we were all together is to, the person who held up the 1 or the 2, it's always great to ask them, but I don't want to put anybody on the spot here. So is somebody who answered, to what degree is this best practice implemented in your operations? Can somebody who answered that in a 8 or a 9 or a 7, somewhere in there, willing to share why they gave that rating? Like, what are they seeing? So can somebody unmute or put a note in the chat? Don't be bashful. I've got prizes.
I can share. This is Michelle Alden from Brooklyn Center Community Schools. I'm the Wellbeing Specialist, and we have really phenomenal support around both student and staff well-being initiatives across all departments and within most departments at multiple levels. The most difficult level is the level that is directly working with students, mostly because of capacity. And but like from the top throughout most of the levels, yes, that leadership engagement is there. I would say that a lot of these practices that you're listing are kind of a dream for me, just because in a school situation, we're so constrained by time and money on what we can offer for staff as far as when it's scheduled and when they can be in or outside of duty day, according to contracts. So, but yes, it's still very grateful for our leadership.
Hey, so Michelle, first of all, thank you for working in our school districts. I got 2 school-age kids, so really appreciate all of the folks working with schools, and also really understand that constraint. I think what's interesting in my work, I look at school teachers and in healthcare, a lot of our patient-facing staff like nurses, but also I'll stretch us and say in manufacturing, there are people who are in production roles where getting that time, whether it's because of a union contract or the structure of the day, it's really hard. And that's why these kinds of conversations of pulling leaders together is important. Because you were the brave person, I'm going to send you a little thank you package. In it, you are going to get a 5-minute gratitude journal. And even though it's still dark before you go to work, and probably sometimes when you get home, a little light up armband to keep you safe when you're out walking. And of course, You can work out anywhere. And so I'm also going to send you your own stretchy band. So all that's going to come in the mail. And our friends at the chamber are going to track you down so that we can get your address and send it to you. And I'm just teeing that all up because we have another poll, another chance for someone else to share something that they're seeing. So let's go to the next poll if we could. All right, comprehensiveness. So if you remember, comprehensiveness was that element about it's including all, your program includes all elements of well-being. So it's not just diet and exercise, but it's also comprehensive in terms of you're working on supporting individuals, it's working on changing the environment, and you have good communications and engagement strategies. So that's what comprehensive is. So how comprehensive is your program? And then when you think about the comprehensiveness, is everything really effective or not? So if someone wants to chime in right away while we're waiting for the poll to come in and share, again, if someone's in that, 7, 8, 9 range or 10 wants to share a story, that would be really great. And I have prizes for you.
You can go. I'm Lauren from Senior Link. And we actually have, I work with the benefits as well as wellness, and our benefit broker has a wellness team who we're really lucky that we have been, when a couple of years ago, we really just didn't really have much with our wellness program, but the past 2 years, we've really built everything up. We also have a budget from our insurance provider, which has been huge, but so our working with our broker has really helped us put in all of these practices into place. And we're actually kind of at our, what I consider the biggest step is now we're building out our wellness committee to bring out people from all different parts of the company. So I think even in the past 2 years, we've made huge strides. And I would say the biggest lacking piece right now is that right now it really is a human resources thing, but we are actually this month building out our wellness committee. So,
Lauren, that is super great to hear that during those 2 years that we've all been through, that you were able to lean in and take in the guidance and the structure. That is something that we are hearing from a lot of employers. It's just like how well the pandemic raised awareness. And I have to say, it's really exciting looking at the poll results that just popped up, how comprehensive many of you feel you've got things. I mean, the vast majority here are, in the 7, 8, 9, 10 range, and a few folks, room for improvement. And that's great because you need to know. Now, it's interesting, if you look at the effectiveness scores, turned a little bit lower, not a ton. And that's not surprising because it's easy to say you're doing a lot, but not to do a lot well. And I think this is, again, where if you were in a small group of your colleagues, you'd be able to have a conversation. If you saw these exact results, you're like, okay, so there are a lot of us with 5s. What do we need to do better? And if we take the 5 and unders, like there's clearly a sense that we're not doing the best work we could. And so how do we improve it? So I'm going to close out my poll and just wrap up with a couple last thoughts on how to use best practices both as a guide, but also as an instrument. And so one of the things that we do when we're working with clients is help them build their annual plan around the best practices. It's very simple. If you know what you're trying to get done and you have a structure, you can say, yeah, we are choosing to make sure that we're building out these capabilities in our wellness program and applying these principles. So that's why we really work to try to make sure annual plans are built around a best practice framework. And then your wellness committee, when they meet at least monthly, hopefully, you can, obviously you get your work that you got to get done to keep everything moving, but you can also build in a discipline of saying, hey, based on our assessment, we saw opportunities in, let's say, principle 6 We're going to put it on an agenda to do a deep dive and spend some time talking in our wellness community about how we can improve those numbers that we were averaging in effectiveness, let's say, a 4 or 5, and we want to improve the effectiveness so that you can bring this group evaluation forward into your operational work that then will lead to better programming, that it leads to better results. One of the things that we've observed with employers that have multiple locations or multiple different teams with different specialties is that doing a evaluation process, a group evaluation process like this, where you might have 10 or 12 or 15 tables around a room, each with 7 or 8 people doing this scoring process, is, you might have a plant here and a plant there, or like in a schools, you got this elementary school and this middle school and this elementary school, etc. And as people see those different scores popping up, it creates some friendly competition, but also the ability to share across organization within the broader family. And then our last recommendation is just do this about every 2 or 3 years, because frankly, a lot of these things don't change every year. And so you can use the time every year meaningfully to kind of reinforce and build your well-being leadership, but you don't need to do assessment every year at this depth, because it won't add as much value. So our last slide, kind of key takeaways. If we jump ahead, so there are clear best practice design principles. They can help you drive a return on investment, and we just want to share, this concept of using them both as your strategic framework, building them into your plan, and again, doing that so that leadership at the executive on down level connect their decisions to best practices, and that may choose for a certain year not doing something, but at least they know they're choosing not to. But then last but not least, you can use this kind of measurement and design work both as a measurement and as an intervention to build knowledge and capacity. So with that, I'm going to turn it to the last slide, which I thought was kind of cute. Questions? Looking at me sideways? You think this is all goofy? Or where do you want to go? So with that, we can stop screen sharing and just, if there's questions in the chat, I'm going to turn it back to my colleagues at the chamber.
Thank you, Joel. I have been tracking the chat. So far, we don't have questions. I was successful in securing mailing addresses, so the goodie boxes can go out as planned. There was a great comment from Nancy O'Brien, which is a great segue into my closing remarks. She, in response to Michelle's comments about the tightness and timing of schools and implementing this for their educators, MDH has a grant for school nurses and mental health workers, and she listed the link, minservcoop.org. So that is in the chats for everyone. And then that leads me to our next set of slides, and I think Amy has them up. Christine is far more tech savvy than I, so bear with me here. You guys definitely got the B team with me today, but I appreciate your patience. So in bringing up additional resources, MSP Wellness also has an employer resource hub, and this is a place for employers to find resources, connections, and opportunities focused on enhancing the health and well-being of employees and communities. And inside this hub, which is fantastic, is a curated list of health and wellness organizations that provide services and products across our entire state. There's a collection of articles and resources on a wide variety of health and wellness topics that you can share with your teams. There's pre-recorded content from past events featuring reputable health and wellness experts. And there's opportunities to engage with other MSP wellness programs. Learning from each other is often the best way. So to learn more, please copy this link at the bottom. Visit mspwellness.com/join-hub. And then the next slide, Amy. There are microgrants available and community partner funding awards. So the Microgrant Community Partner Funding Award Program provides small businesses in Minneapolis with funding and technical assistance for wellness-focused activities and programs that improve employee physical and mental health. And these grants are available through a partnership between the Minneapolis Health Department, the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, and they leverage funding from the Minnesota Department of Health Statewide Health Improvement Partnership Grant Often you know that as SHIP. So to be eligible, businesses must have a branch or location within the city of Minneapolis and have between 10 and 100 full-time employees. They just extended the application deadline from to February 24th. So please, if you are interested in this, please visit mspwellness.com/microgrants. Don't let funding be a reason you don't engage in this for your teams. The next slide, Amy. Just a little bit about this partnership between Living Well and Health Partners and MSP Wellness. We have teamed up to offer employers, regardless of your insurer or your membership, access to best-in-class services, typically only available to larger employers. And the Living Well Community Solution is a health and well-being program that combines employer and community efforts into a comprehensive experience. Together, we collaborate to customize the well-being portal to support the employer culture with aligned community goals to ensure an all-encompassing participant experience. And that's really what this boils down to, is the experience for our teams. So with that, we will go to Q&A. And so please continue to load them in the chat or raise your hand and we can call on you. But Joel, I do have one question. This is from Lauren Sweet, who participated after our poll. She is asking, do you have any advice on the most effective way to communicate wellness program information? She's seen people recommend moving away from the email communications.
So I have a couple of things. Email doesn't work if it's not relevant and timely and personal. However, email is helpful for having it available when the person wants to go back and find it. So the number one most effective engagement communication is personal testimony, bar none. It's people sharing stories. So when you can have a robust set of wellness champions who can own and share their story as an example, that is really, really helpful. So the other one is obviously leaders and having leaders share information when they bring people together. So I would just say, like, remember that stories are what motivate people, pulls up the heart, but you need to support the head. And at Health Partners, we often talk about head and heart together. So it's about, they need access to the information. I think Evan just put this notion of a consistent weekly or monthly message. Absolutely. Because again, people need to know that where they can go find it when they want it, but they need to have their heart remind them to go look for it. So those would be my comments. So Evan, totally agree. Consistent, regular, written somewhere is important.
Great. We've got time for some more questions. If you want to type them into the chat, or if you just want to use your hand raise or turn on your camera, we can call on you. We've got about 10 minutes for Q&A if anyone has some. A little bit of housekeeping. Joel, I did get a question if we would be sending out the slides. I responded, yes, we would. We are also recording this webinar, and I'm sure Christine will send the link to that as well afterwards.
Yeah, we also will provide the original study that was published in 2014 that will allow you to see the in-depth 9 best practices and the sources for that, just because it's open source and we just want to make sure that people understand where it came from and provide credit where credit is due for the great work that we're riding on the shoulders of.
Great, thank you, Joel. All right, any questions? I'm not seeing any coming through in the chat, and I don't see anyone turning on their cameras to ask. So with that, we are going to give you some time back. My name is Angie Whitcomb. It has been my pleasure to step in for my colleague Christine Levens today, and we wish her good health. Joel, thank you for your partnership in this program and for this valuable information. A lot of comments in the chat about thank you and great information. So, and I hope that you've all enjoyed your time spent with us today and that this has inspired you to go create wellness opportunities within your own organizations. Thank you, be well, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.